Humanity blasted its way into the galactic community, with nuclear fire and bloodshed. Frank Reed crept through the shadowy corridors of the Nausicaan command center, his grip tightening on his pulse rifle as he scanned for hostiles. Charges were set on the reactor core, primed to cripple this key military installation. Revenge would be swift and brutal. 6 months ago, the Nausicaans launched an unprovoked orbital bombardment on the human colony of Novus Prime. Firestorms raged across the settlements. Over 10,000 men, women, and children incinerated in the blasts. Families obliterated in an instant. The Nausicaans claimed it was a misunderstanding and a navigation error. Humanity seethed with fury. The galactic community urged restraint and forgiveness. Accept reparations and an apology, they said. Move on. But humanity's rage could not be placated by mere words and credits. The Nausicaans' casual slaughter of human civilians would not go unanswered. If the galactic community wouldn't punish this act of war, then humanity would, alone. Within weeks, human fleets smashed through Nausicaan lines, bombardments and marine assaults crippling their offensive capabilities. The aliens reeled, stunned by the ferocity and speed of the human counterattack. This mission to destroy the command center was the next phase, forced the Nausicaans to end things on humanity's terms. Distant plasma fire snapped Frank's focus back to the mission. A Nausicaan patrol had discovered them. His team took up defensive positions, pouring withering fire into the attacking aliens. Nausicaan bodies crumpled to the deck. Humanity's superior arms and training were on full display. A searing pain tore through Frank's abdomen. He looked down to see a charred hole punched through his armor, the acrid stench of burnt flesh filling his nostrils. A hulking Nausicaan commander emerged through the smoke, a glowing plasma blade in his claws. Frank raised his rifle, vision blurring, and squeezed the trigger. The commander's head burst like a smashed melon, gore splattering the corridor walls. Frank slumped to the ground, the clatter of boots the last thing he heard before darkness took him. If he died here, at least he'd done so defending humanity. At least he'd sent more alien bastards to hell. It was up to his team now to get him out before the charges blew. The fate of the war hung in the balance. His team dragged Frank's limp body into the stealth shuttle, leaving a trail of blood behind them. Sergeant Ramirez, the team medic, immediately got to work, cutting away the charred armor and applying pressure to the wound. "Stay with me, Commander," Ramirez urged, his hands slick with Frank's blood. "We're getting you out of here." The shuttle lifted off, cloaking engaged, and shot into the star-filled void. As they raced towards human space, Frank drifted in and out of consciousness, the pain from his wound mixing with the sedatives Ramirez had administered. In his hazy state, Frank's mind wandered to the events that led to this moment. He remembered the galactic community's outrage when humanity declared war on the Nausicaans. The Galactic Council demanded that Earth accept a ceasefire, threatening sanctions and isolation if they refused. But humanity's leaders didn't bend. In a move that shocked the galaxy, they withdrew from the Council entirely, severing all ties. Decades of resentment over the Council's double standards and prejudice against humans came to a head. The people of Earth rallied behind the decision, united in their determination to see the Nausicaans pay for their crimes. A sudden beep from the comm panel pulled Frank back to the present. Ramirez answered the call, his face growing grim as he listened. "Commander," he said, turning to Frank, "we have a situation. The Nausicaans have launched an attack on Novus Prime. High Command says the colony's defenses won't hold long." Frank's heart sank. Novus Prime was still rebuilding from the last attack. Its fall would crush human morale. He struggled to sit up, ignoring the searing pain in his abdomen. "Set a course for Novus Prime," he ordered, his voice strained. "We have to do something." "But, sir, your injuries," Ramirez protested. "We need to get you to a medical facility." "Novus Prime needs us more," Frank insisted. "I have a plan. We can buy them some time." As the shuttle changed course, racing towards the besieged colony, Frank outlined his idea. They would use the stealth shuttle to sneak aboard the Nausicaan flagship and sabotage it from within. With the enemy fleet in disarray, Novus Prime's defenses might hold until reinforcements arrived. The team exchanged glances, the risks of the plan sinking in. But they trusted Frank with their lives. They nodded, determination etched on their faces. As they approached the Nausicaan fleet, Frank pulled himself to his feet, his face ashen. He met each of his team members' eyes. "We've all lost someone to these bastards," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Today we make sure they can never take another human life." He placed a hand on the shuttle wall to steady himself. "Whatever happens, I'm proud to have fought alongside each of you." With that, they began their infiltration of the flagship, the fate of Novus Prime hanging by a thread. The shuttle shuddered as it latched onto the Nausicaan flagship's hull, the docking clamps locking into place with a dull thunk. Frank winced, the jarring motion sending fresh waves of pain through his injured body. Ramirez, noticing his commander's discomfort, reached out to steady him. "Sir, maybe you should sit this one out," the medic suggested, concern etched on his face. "You've lost a lot of blood." Frank shook his head, pushing himself to his feet. "Not an option. I'm not letting you go in there without me." The team exchanged worried glances, but knew better than to argue. They had a mission to complete, and Frank was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. As they slipped through the maintenance airlock, the eerie silence of the ship's corridors greeted them. The Nausicaans were known for their strict discipline, but the lack of patrols was unsettling. "Ramirez, take half the team and head for the weapons systems," Frank ordered, his voice low. "Plant those charges and get out. The rest of you with me. We're taking the bridge." The team split up, each group moving swiftly and silently through the ship. Frank's vision swam, the edges blurring as he pushed forward, his rifle held at the ready. The pain in his abdomen was a constant companion, but he gritted his teeth and pressed on. As they approached the bridge, the lack of resistance became even more apparent. No guards, no security measures. It was as if the Nausicaans had simply abandoned their posts. The doors to the bridge hissed open, revealing an empty room. Frank's instinct screamed that something was wrong, but before he could react, the doors slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside. "Commander Reed," Hector sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "How kind of you to join me." Frank raised his rifle, aiming it at the hologram. "Hector, I should have known you'd be too stubborn to die." The Nausicaan laughed, a cruel, grating sound. "Did you really think you could infiltrate my ship so easily? I allowed you to come aboard, human. I wanted to see the look on your face when I destroyed everything you hold dear." A cold dread settled in Frank's gut. "What are you talking about?" Hector's smile widened, his sharp teeth glinting in the holographic light. "As we speak, my fleet is preparing to launch a full-scale bombardment of Novus Prime. By the time you realize what's happening, your precious colony will be nothing but a smoking crater." Fury surged through Frank's veins, and he lunged forward, his fist passing uselessly through the hologram. His team scrambled to the bridge's control panels, desperately trying to override the ship's systems. Hector's laughter echoed through the room. "Fools! This bridge is a decoy. The real command center is elsewhere on the ship, and by the time you find it, it will be too late." Frank's mind raced, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Novus Prime was defenseless, its fate hanging by a thread. He had to make a choice, and he had to make it now. "Get out of here," he ordered his team, his voice like steel. "Abandon the mission, warn Novus Prime and tell High Command what's coming. I'll find the real bridge and stop the bombardment." "That's an order. Novus Prime is all that matters now. I'll buy you as much time as I can." With heavy hearts, his team reluctantly complied. As they fought their way back to the shuttle, Frank turned to face the holographic Hector, a grim determination settling over him. "You want me, Hector? Come and get me." And with that, he plunged into the heart of the ship, racing against time to find the real bridge and stop the impending destruction of Novus Prime. Frank staggered through the dimly lit corridors of the Nausicaan flagship, his pulse rifle held at the ready. Blood seeped through the makeshift bandage around his abdomen, each step sending a fresh wave of agony through his battered body. But he pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that every second brought Novus Prime closer to destruction. As he rounded a corner, Frank stumbled upon a sight that made his heart leap. A group of human prisoners, their faces gaunt and haunted, huddled together in a cramped cell. They were survivors from the initial attack on the colony 6 months ago. Frank's grip tightened on his rifle as he approached the cell, his mind racing. "Please help us," one of the prisoners pleaded, her voice hoarse. "We've been here for months, enduring their torture and interrogations." Frank hesitated, torn between his mission to find the real bridge and his duty to protect these human lives. As he struggled with the decision, a woman stepped forward from the group, her eyes fierce and intelligent. "Commander Reed," she said, recognizing his uniform. "I'm Dr. Lena Sorensen. I was studying Nausicaan culture before the attack." She paused, sensing his dilemma. "I can help you find the real bridge, but you have to free us first." Frank's jaw clenched as he weighed his options. Every instinct screamed at him to continue his search, but he knew he couldn't leave these people behind. With a sharp nod, he blasted the cell's lock and helped the prisoners to their feet. As they made their way through the ship, Dr. Sorensen fell into step beside Frank, her voice low and urgent. "Nausicaan command structures are highly decentralized," she explained. "They have multiple redundant control centers to ensure resilience in battle. The real bridge is likely hidden in the most heavily armored section of the ship, near the engine room." Frank absorbed the information, his mind racing. With renewed determination, he led the group towards the engine room, his rifle at the ready. They encountered Nausicaan patrols along the way, the sound of plasma fire echoing through the corridors. Frank and the prisoners fought with a desperate ferocity, knowing that their lives and the fate of Novus Prime hung in the balance. As they neared their destination, a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking their path. Commander Hector, his face a twisted mask of rage and hatred, stood before them, a plasma rifle in his claws. "Did you really think you could outsmart me, human?" Hector snarled, his eyes glinting with malice. "I've rigged this ship's reactor to detonate. Even if you stop the bombardment, Novus Prime will still burn." Frank's blood ran cold as Hector continued, his voice dripping with venom. "Surrender now and I'll spare your pathetic lives. Your prisoners will be executed, of course, but you'll live to see another day." Frank's grip tightened on his rifle, his resolve hardening. "Go to hell," he spat, his voice raw with emotion. "I'm not letting you murder an entire colony." Hector's face contorted with rage, and he lunged forward, his plasma blade flashing. Frank met him head-on, their weapons clashing in a shower of sparks. They fought with a savage intensity, their personal duel mirroring the larger war between their species. Despite his injuries, Frank managed to land a crushing blow, sending Hector staggering back. The Nausicaan commander, his face twisted with hatred, reached for a control panel on the wall. With a final defiant snarl, he activated the reactor's self-destruct sequence before collapsing to the floor, his life bleeding out onto the deck. Frank stared at the blinking countdown on the panel, his heart pounding. They had mere minutes to stop the detonation and the bombardment. He turned to Dr. Sorensen, his eyes blazing with determination. "We have to get to that bridge, now." Together, they raced through the ship, the countdown ticking away in their minds. The fate of Novus Prime and the lives of everyone on board the flagship hung by a thread. Frank and Dr. Sorensen burst onto the hidden bridge, pulse rifles blazing. The surprised Nausicaan crew barely had time to react before they were cut down, their bodies crumpling to the deck in sprays of green blood. "Cancel that bombardment order," Frank yelled, racing to the ship's control console. His fingers flew over the interface, searching for the override command. Dr. Sorensen joined him, her brow furrowed in concentration as she worked to navigate the alien system. "I've got it," she exclaimed triumphantly, slamming her palm down on the console. "Bombardment cancelled." But their victory was short-lived. An ominous countdown began to flash on the main view screen, the Nausicaan numerals ticking down with terrifying speed. Frank's blood ran cold as he realized what it meant. He turned back to the console, desperately searching for a way to abort the detonation. But the system was locked down tight, demanding a Nausicaan biometric override. Frank slammed his fist against the console in frustration, his mind racing. Then it hit him. Hector, The Nausicaan commander's body was still warm, his biosignature fresh. If they could get his hand to the scanner... "Stay here," Frank ordered Dr. Sorensen. "Keep trying to crack that lockout. I'm going to get Hector." He sprinted from the bridge, his chest heaving with exertion, as he retraced his steps back to the site of their earlier confrontation. The countdown echoed in his mind, each second bringing them closer to oblivion. There, Hector's corpse lay where it had fallen, the Nausicaan's lifeless eyes staring up at the ceiling. Frank grabbed the body by the arm, grunting with effort, as he began to drag it back towards the bridge. The dead weight seemed to fight him every step of the way, Hector's bulk threatening to overcome Frank's waning strength. By the time he hauled the corpse onto the bridge, Frank was panting, his vision swimming from blood loss and fatigue. Dr. Sorensen looked up from the console, her eyes widening as she took in the grisly sight. "Help me get his hand on the scanner," Frank said through gritted teeth. Together, they manhandled Hector's body to the console, Frank positioning the commander's limp hand over the biometric reader. The system beeped, red light washing over Hector's grey flesh. Nothing happened. The countdown continued unabated, the self-destruct sequence barreling towards its inevitable conclusion. "It's not working," Dr. Sorensen said, her voice tinged with panic. "The scanner can't read his biosignature." Frank stared at Hector's hand, his mind racing. There had to be a way. Then a memory surfaced, a fragment of his special forces training, a grim technique reserved for the most desperate of situations. With a steady hand belied by the circumstances, Frank began to carefully cut away the skin from Hector's palm, peeling it back from the underlying flesh with surgical precision. Dr. Sorensen watched in horrified fascination, her face pale. As the countdown ticked down to its final seconds, Frank placed the grisly skin graft onto the scanner, his heart pounding in his ears. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, nothing happened. Then a beep. The scanner flashed green, accepting the macabre override. On the main view screen, the countdown froze, the self-destruct sequence deactivating mere moments before detonation. Frank slumped against the console, his knees weak with relief. They had done it. Novus Prime was safe, the Nausicaan threat neutralized, but even as he savored their victory, his mind turned to the human prisoners still trapped on the ship. "We can't leave them behind," he said, pushing himself upright. "We have to get them out of here." Dr. Sorensen nodded, her face set with determination. "The Nausicaans have escape pods," she said, calling up a schematic of the ship. "They're designed for stealth insertions and should be able to slip past the rest of the fleet undetected." As they began to plan their next move, Frank's personal comm crackled to life. It was his team, their voices tinged with urgency. Frank's heart sank as Ramirez continued. "Long-range sensors have picked up another Nausicaan fleet entering the system. It's bigger than the first one, and it's headed straight for the colony." The news hit Frank like a punch to the gut. After everything they had endured, all the sacrifices they had made, Novus Prime was still in danger. He looked to Dr. Sorensen, seeing his own grim resolve mirrored in her eyes. Their mission was far from over. The battle for Novus Prime was about to reach its climax, and the fate of the colony hung in the balance. Frank took a deep breath, pushing aside his exhaustion and pain. They had work to do. As the second Nausicaan fleet bore down on Novus Prime, Frank surveyed the rescued prisoners, preparing to evacuate in the escape pods. His heart ached at the thought of leaving them, but he knew that every ship in the reinforcements would be needed to defend the colony. He turned to Dr. Sorensen, his voice low and urgent. "I'm staying on the flagship," he said, his jaw set with determination. "I can use it to buy time for the evacuation and thin out their numbers before they reach the planet." Dr. Sorensen met his gaze, her eyes blazing with the same resolve. "I'm staying with you," she said firmly. "My knowledge of Nausicaan systems will be invaluable in operating this ship." Frank nodded, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. Together they bid farewell to the departing prisoners, promising to hold the line as long as they could. As the enemy fleet approached, Frank and Dr. Sorensen raced through the flagship's corridors. their footsteps echoing against the alien metal. They burst onto the bridge, frantically working to bring the ship's weapons systems back online. "Main cannon is operational," Dr. Sorensen called out, her fingers flying over the console. Frank gripped the helm controls, his eyes narrowing as the Nausicaan ships came within range. "Break away from the fleet," he ordered, his voice like steel. "Draw their fire and give our reinforcements a chance to engage on better terms." The flagship surged forward, breaking formation and charging towards the enemy lines. Nausicaan fire erupted around them, the ship shuddering under the impacts. Frank and Dr. Sorensen held fast, their faces illuminated by the glow of the consoles. The flagship's main cannon roared to life, lancing out with searing beams of energy. Nausicaan ships shattered under the onslaught, debris spiraling into the void. Frank and Dr. Sorensen worked in perfect unison, their movements fluid and precise as they fought to keep the ship in the fight. But the enemy adapted quickly, focusing their fire on the rogue flagship with ruthless efficiency. Alarms blared as the ship's shields buckled, critical systems flickering and failing under the barrage. "Shields are down to 20%, Dr. Sorensen reported, her voice strained. "We can't take much more of this." Frank's grip tightened on the controls, his eyes blazing with determination. "We hold the line," he said through gritted teeth. "We fight until there's nothing left." The bridge shook violently, sparks cascading from ruptured conduits. Smoke filled the air, acrid and choking. Frank and Dr. Sorensen clung to their stations, refusing to yield, even as the ship crumbled around them. Just as all seemed lost, a new contact flashed on the sensors. A massive shape emerged from the depths of space, its hull bristling with weapons. It was a human dreadnought, the pride of the Earth fleet, and it was tearing into the Nausicaan forces with all the fury of an avenging angel. Frank and Dr. Sorensen watched in awe as the dreadnought carved a path through the enemy lines, its advanced weaponry scything through the Nausicaan ships like a reaper through wheat. Explosions lit the void, the remnants of enemy vessels tumbling in its wake. With renewed hope surging through their veins, Frank and Dr. Sorensen rallied the flagship for one final push. Side by side with the human reinforcements, they plunged into the fray, the battered ship fighting with the strength of a wounded beast. The battle raged around them, a maelstrom of fire and debris as the fate of Novus Prime hung in the balance. As the Nausicaan fleet turned tail and fled, Frank's heart sank as he saw the salvo of torpedoes streaking towards Novus Prime on the sensors. The colony's defenses were still recovering, its interceptors spread too thin. They'd never take out all the warheads in time. Frank's fingers flew over the controls, his mind racing. There was only one way. "Dr. Sorensen," he barked into the comm, "plot an intercept course. We're going to ram those torpedoes." "What? No." Dr. Sorensen's voice cracked with emotion. "Frank, you can't. There has to be another—" "There's no time," Frank snapped, his tone softening. "Lena, please, it's the only way." Silence, then Dr. Sorensen's voice thick with unshed tears. "Course plotted, Frank." "Get to the escape pods," Frank ordered gently. "I'll be right behind you as soon as I engage the thrusters, I promise." He watched on the monitors as Dr. Sorensen fled the bridge, a solitary figure racing through the ship's ruined corridors. Alone now, Frank took a shuddering breath, his hands trembling as he gripped the controls. As the flagship lurched forward, alarms blaring, Frank's life flashed before his eyes. Memories of battles fought, friends lost, his team, his brothers and sisters in arms. Would they understand? Would they know he had no choice? The torpedoes filled the view screen now, hurtling towards him like the fingers of some vengeful god. Frank's jaw clenched, his eyes hard. "Come on, you bastards," he growled. "Come and get me." He punched the thrusters to full, the ship groaning in protest as it leaped forward. The distance closed with terrifying speed, the torpedoes growing until they filled his entire world. The impact shattered reality, the flagship crumpling like tin foil as it slammed into the torpedoes. For a heartbeat, all was silent. Then the reactor breached, a miniature sun blooming in the void. On the planet's surface, the people of Novus Prime shielded their eyes against the sudden flare. A second dawn birthed and dying in the span of a single breath. They watched in stunned silence as the fragments of the Nausicaan torpedoes burned up in the atmosphere, their deadly payloads reduced to impotent cinders by the flagship's sacrifice. In the escape pod, Dr. Sorensen watched the explosion through tear-blurred eyes, her heart shattering even as her mind reeled at the magnitude of what Frank had done. He had saved them all at the cost of his own life. As the pod descended towards Novus Prime, Dr. Sorensen made a silent vow. She would not let Frank's sacrifice be in vain. She would pick up where he left off, fighting for the future he had given everything to protect. It would not be easy. The scars of the Nausicaan attack ran deep, both on the planet and in the hearts of its people. But as the escape pod touched down and the hatch hissed open, Dr. Sorensen stepped out into the light of a new day, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The survivors of the flagship, the rescued prisoners, gathered around her, their faces etched with grief and determination. They looked to her now, for guidance, for hope. Dr. Sorensen took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "Frank gave his life so that we could have a future," she said, her voice ringing out across the landing pad. "Now it's up to us to make sure that future is worth fighting for." And with that, she turned towards the shattered skyline of Novus Prime, ready to begin the long, hard work of rebuilding. In the distance, the wreckage of the flagship still burned, a pyre of the fallen, a testament to the indomitable will of the human spirit. In the aftermath of the Battle of Novus Prime, Dr. Lena Sorensen immersed herself in the war effort, poring over captured Nausicaan data logs and interrogation transcripts. Her expertise in their culture and technology made her an invaluable asset, but the pain of losing Frank never strayed far from her thoughts. One morning, a summons from Admiral Hackett shook Lena from her research. She found him in the war room, his face grave as he gestured to a hollow projection of a Nausicaan-held planet. "Dr. Sorensen, we have a situation," Hackett said, zooming in on a fortified facility. "Intel suggests the Nausicaans are developing a biological weapon here capable of wiping out entire human colonies." Lena's blood ran cold. The implications were horrifying. Hackett continued, "Your knowledge of their systems makes you uniquely qualified to infiltrate the base and neutralize the threat." Memories of Frank's sacrifice flooded Lena's mind, his bravery, his unwavering dedication to protecting humanity. She met Hackett's gaze, her jaw set. "I'll do it, Admiral. For Frank, and for every life we lost." The mission prep was a blur. Lena trained relentlessly alongside her assigned team, an elite unit of operatives handpicked for the task. Among them was Lieutenant Jake Briggs, a young soldier with a quick wit and fierce loyalty. As they sparred in the gym, trading blows and tactics, Lena found a kindred spirit in Jake. They bonded over shared losses and a grim determination to see the war through to the end. Lena slammed a fresh power cell into her rifle. "As ready as I'll ever be. We can't let that weapon leave the ground." Insertion came under cover of darkness. Their stolen Nausicaan shuttle slipped through enemy defenses, sensors and codes, courtesy of Lena's tireless pre-mission prep. They touched down in the facility's shipyard, a cavernous space bustling with activity. Nausicaan workers swarmed over half-assembled fighters and transports, sparks flying from welding torches. But their infiltration did not go unnoticed. An alarm blared, harsh and grating in the confines of the shipyard. Nausicaan soldiers poured from every door, plasma rifles crackling with deadly energy. "So much for stealth," Jake quipped, dropping 2 guards with well-placed shots. "Time for Plan B." They fought their way into the bowels of the facility, a running battle through twisting corridors and cavernous assembly chambers. Lena's knowledge of Nausicaan systems proved vital, guiding them past security choke points and through maintenance tunnels. As they neared the central lab, a cold dread settled in Lena's gut. She knew this feeling, had felt it on the bridge of that fated dreadnought. Her fears were confirmed as an all-too-familiar figure stepped from the shadows. Commander Ector, his face a twisted mass of scar tissue, leveled his weapon at Lena's chest. "Dr. Sorensen," he sneered, "how fitting that you should die here, surrounded by the fruits of our labors." Plasma fire erupted in the tight confines, Jake and the team laying down a blistering barrage to cover Lena. But Ector was fast, inhumanly so, and before she could react he was on her, slamming her into the wall with brutal force. They grappled, Lena's rifle skittering away across the blood-slicked floor. Ector's words were poison in her ear, taunting her with Frank's death, the inevitability of humanity's defeat. But as they fought, a strange calm descended over Lena. She remembered Frank's courage, his sacrifice, and she knew with a sudden, blinding clarity that to honor him, she had to be better. With a final, desperate surge of strength, Lena broke Ector's grip. She drove her knee into his chest, doubling him over, and followed with a crackling stun baton to the base of his skull. The Nausicaan collapsed, his body twitching with residual current. Lena stood over him, chest heaving, baton raised for the killing blow, but she hesitated. To strike Ector down in cold blood, no matter his crimes, would make her no better than him. No better than the enemy they fought. She lowered her arm, stun cuffs snapping around Ector's wrists with a hiss of pneumatics. He would face justice, answer for his atrocities. But not like this. Lena and her team pushed on, the biological weapons containment unit looming before them. As they rigged the explosives, klaxons blaring and automated defenses whirring to life around them, Lena caught Jake's eye. "For Frank," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "For everyone we lost." The lab vanished in a thunderclap of fire and shattered metal, the shockwave hurling them back into the corridor. Lena's ears rang, her vision swimming, but she hauled herself to her feet. They had to move before the entire place came down around them. The exfiltration was a running firefight, Nausicaan resistance dogging their every step. Lena lost count of the close calls, the near misses, but they pushed on, their objective complete, the biological threat neutralized. It was only as they reached the extraction point, a battered Jake leaning heavily against her, that Lena allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. They had struck a blow today, made a difference. But the war raged on, and she knew there would be more missions, more sacrifices. She thought of Frank then, as the evac shuttle lifted off in a roar of engines, of his courage, his unwavering dedication to the cause, and she knew that as long as his memory lived on, as long as humanity had soldiers like Jake and the rest of her team, they would never stop fighting. The shuttle tore through the atmosphere, Nausicaan fire chasing them into the void. Lena leaned back in her restraints, the adrenaline slowly fading from her system. They had won today, but the war stretched out before them, long and brutal and bloody. But they would face it together, shoulder to shoulder until the end. For Earth, for humanity, for the future Frank had died to protect. The shuttle banked hard, the inky blackness of space filling the viewports. Lena closed her eyes, exhaustion finally claiming her, but even in the depths of sleep, she knew her fight was far from over. The intel from the raid on the Nausicaan research facility proved invaluable. Armed with a deeper understanding of the enemy's strategies and capabilities, Admiral Hackett, with Dr. Sorensen's guidance, launched a series of devastating strikes against key Nausicaan military installations. Supply depots erupted in flames, command centers crumbled under orbital bombardment, and shipyards lay in ruins, the twisted wreckage of half-built warships drifting in the void. With each successful operation, humanity's forces grew bolder, striking deeper into Nausicaan territory. Dr. Sorensen's insights into the alien psyche allowed human tacticians to anticipate their foes' moves, exploiting weaknesses and sowing chaos in their ranks. As the tide of war shifted, Dr. Sorensen and Lilton Briggs found themselves called to Admiral Hackett's flagship for a top-secret briefing. The scars of their recent battles still fresh, they stood at attention as the Admiral outlined their next mission. "We have a golden opportunity," Hackett said, his voice grave. "Our spies have located a Nausicaan shipyard where they're building a prototype stealth frigate. If we can capture that ship, it could change everything." Dr. Sorensen leaned forward, her eyes bright with determination. "What's the plan, sir?" The Admiral activated a holographic display, the shipyard's schematics rotating slowly. "You'll lead a team of our best commandos, along with some allied alien specialists, infiltrate the shipyard, secure the frigate, and bring it back to our lines." Lieutenant Briggs frowned, studying the display. "It won't be easy, sir. Those shipyards are heavily defended." "No one said it would be easy, Lieutenant," Hackett replied. "But if we pull this off, we'll have a weapon that could turn the Nausicans' own stealth tech against them." As the briefing concluded, Dr. Sorensen and Lieutenant Briggs shared a look of grim resolve. They knew the risks, but they also knew what was at stake. For the memory of those they'd lost, for the future of humanity, they would not fail. The journey to the Nausicaan shipyard was fraught with peril. Dr. Sorensen and Lieutenant Briggs's team, a mix of battle-hardened human commandos and lithe, deadly alien warriors, navigated through treacherous asteroid fields and past heavily armed patrols. The tension was palpable, each member of the team knowing that a single mistake could spell disaster. As they neared their target, Dr. Sorensen's heart raced. She thought of Frank, of his courage in the face of impossible odds. She silently vowed to honor his memory, to fight with the same unyielding spirit that had defined his life. The shipyard loomed before them, a sprawling complex of docks and assembly bays orbiting a gas giant. Nausicaan warships, sleek and lethal, patrolled the perimeter, their sensor arrays probing the void for any hint of intrusion. With a series of deft maneuvers, the infiltration team slipped past the outer defenses, their stealth technology masking their approach. They docked with the shipyard's outer hull, cutting through the armored plating with silent efficiency. Once inside, however, their presence did not go unnoticed for long. Alarms blared as Nausicaan soldiers, their faces twisted with rage, poured into the corridors. The commandos met them head-on, the confined spaces erupting with the din of battle. Dr. Sorensen and Lieutenant Briggs fought side by side, their weapons spitting plasma, as they pushed deeper into the shipyard. But even as they cut down scores of enemies, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The Nausicans seemed to anticipate their every move, countering their tactics with uncanny precision. As they battled their way towards the prototype frigate's berth, realization dawned on them. The Nausicaan commander leading the defense was no ordinary soldier. His strategies, his intimate knowledge of human combat doctrine, there could be only one explanation. "It's Hector's protégé," Dr. Sorensen said, her voice grim. "He's here." Lieutenant Briggs nodded, his jaw clenched. "We should have known he'd be waiting for us." The protégé's presence changed everything. They were no longer facing a mere military asset, but a driven, cunning adversary who had made it his life's mission to study and defeat humanity's greatest warriors. As the battle raged on, casualties mounting on both sides, Dr. Sorensen and Lieutenant Briggs made a fateful decision. They would split their forces, Lieutenant Briggs leading the bulk of the team in a ferocious assault on the shipyard's main defenses, while Dr. Sorensen took a smaller group to infiltrate the prototype frigate itself. It was a desperate gamble, but one they had to take. With Lieutenant Briggs drawing the protégé's attention, Dr. Sorensen's team managed to slip aboard the frigate, her expertise in Nausicaan technology allowing them to bypass the ship's formidable security measures. But as they reached the bridge, ready to seize control of the vessel, a chilling sight awaited them. The protégé stood before them, his eyes cold and calculating. He had anticipated their strategy, allowing Lieutenant Briggs' diversion to lure him away while he lay in wait for Dr. Sorensen herself. "Dr. Sorensen," he said, his voice a mocking caress, "I've been looking forward to this meeting." Dr. Sorensen raised her rifle, her team fanning out behind her. "I wish I could say the same." A tense standoff ensued, each side waiting for the other to make a move. Dr. Sorensen's mind raced, searching for a way to outmaneuver her brilliant adversary. She thought back to her confrontations with Hector, to the lessons she had learned in the crucible of war. And then, in a flash of insight, she saw it, a flicker of doubt in the protégé's eyes, a momentary hesitation. She seized upon it, her words calculated to sow uncertainty and fear. "You think you know humanity," she said, her voice cold, "but you've only seen a fraction of what we're capable of. We will never stop fighting, never stop adapting, and in the end, we will prevail." The protégé's composure wavered, a crack in his armor, and in that instant Dr. Sorensen struck, her team surging forward in a coordinated assault. The protégé's defenses crumbled, his once unshakable confidence shattered by Dr. Sorensen's psychological warfare. With the bridge secure and the protégé in custody, Dr. Sorensen's team quickly took control of the frigate's systems. They rendezvoused with Leto Briggs's battered but victorious forces, the shipyard now a smouldering ruin behind them. As they made their escape, the prototype frigate's advanced stealth capabilities allowing them to slip away undetected, Dr. Sorensen felt a surge of hope. The stolen ship was a priceless asset, a weapon that could help turn the tide of the war in humanity's favor. But even as they celebrated their victory, Dr. Sorensen knew that their struggle was far from over. The Norsicans, now aware of humanity's growing strength and audacity, would redouble their efforts to crush the resistance. The battles to come would be fiercer, the stakes higher than ever before. As the frigate soared through the stars, carrying its precious cargo and the hopes of humanity, Dr. Sorensen steeled herself for the challenges ahead. With Leltis Briggs and her team at her side, with the memory of Frank's sacrifice burning bright in her heart, she knew that no matter what the future held, they would never stop fighting. For Earth, for the fallen, for the future. The war raged on, but Dr. Sorensen and her allies would meet it head-on, unyielding and unafraid. In the wake of the successful theft of the Norsican prototype frigate, human intelligence operatives worked tirelessly to analyze the trove of data recovered from the ship's computers. Buried deep within the encrypted files, they uncovered a shocking revelation: the location of the Norsican Emperor's secret bunker, hidden beneath the surface of their heavily fortified homeworld. The Emperor, it seemed, had been personally directing the war effort from this secure facility, far from the front lines and the prying eyes of his enemies. Armed with this knowledge, human high command saw an opportunity to strike a decisive blow against the Norsicans and bring an end to the war once and for all. Dr. Sorensen and Lieutenant Briggs were summoned to a top-secret briefing, where they were tasked with leading a small elite team of human and allied commandos on a covert mission to infiltrate the Emperor's bunker and capture him alive. The goal was to force the Norsicans to the negotiating table, using their leader as leverage to secure a favorable peace settlement. The team would use the stolen prototype frigate to slip past the Norsican defenses and land on the surface of their homeworld. From there, they would have to fight their way through the heavily guarded underground complexes, facing wave after wave of Norsican soldiers and deadly automated defense systems. As the briefing concluded, Dr. Sorensen and Lieutenant Briggs shared a look of grim determination. They knew that this mission would be the most dangerous and difficult they had ever undertaken, but they also knew that the fate of humanity and the entire galaxy hung in the balance. In the days that followed, the team trained relentlessly, honing their skills and studying the schematics of the Emperor's bunker. They pored over the intelligence reports, looking for any weakness or vulnerability they could exploit. Finally, the day of the mission arrived. The team boarded the prototype frigate, their faces set with resolve as they prepared to embark on the most important operation of their lives. As the frigate slipped through the Norsican defenses, Dr. Sorensen and Lieutenant Briggs stood on the bridge, watching the alien homeworld grow larger on the view screen. They knew that somewhere down there, in the depths of that hostile planet, the Emperor waited, holding the key to ending the war. The first line of defense was a series of heavily fortified checkpoints, manned by elite Norsican soldiers. The team fought their way through, their superior training and weaponry proving more than a match for the enemy forces. As they descended deeper into the underground complexes, the resistance intensified. Automated turrets sprang to life, filling the air with deadly plasma fire. Norsican battle droids, their metal bodies gleaming in the dim light, charged at the team with relentless fury. But Dr. Sorensen and Lieutenant Briggs led their team forward, their determination unwavering in the face of the enemy onslaught. They pushed deeper and deeper into the bunker, the air growing thicker and the walls closing in around them. Finally, they reached the Emperor's chambers, the massive blast doors looming before them like the gates of hell itself. As they prepared to breach the final defenses, a familiar figure stepped from the shadows, blocking their path. It was Hector's protégé, his face twisted with hatred and his eyes burning with a thirst for revenge. He had been appointed as the Emperor's personal bodyguard, and now stood as the final obstacle between the team and their objective. Lieutenant Briggs stepped forward, his weapon raised, ready to face his old enemy one last time. Dr. Sorensen and the rest of the team prepared to engage, knowing that this battle would be the most brutal and fierce they had ever faced. In a clash of plasma fire and shattered metal, the two sides collided, the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. Lieutenant Briggs fought with a ferocity born of desperation, his every blow fueled by the memory of fallen comrades and the hope for a better future. But Hector's protégé was a formidable opponent, his skills honed by years of training and a burning desire to avenge his fallen mentor. With a swift, brutal strike, he caught Lieutenant Briggs off guard, his plasma blade slicing through armor and flesh with sickening ease. Lieutenant Briggs fell to the ground, his body broken and his life ebbing away. Dr. Sorensen rushed to his side, her heart wrenching as she saw the extent of his injuries. She knew that he would not survive without immediate medical attention, but she also knew that the mission could not afford any delays. With tears in her eyes and a heavy heart, Dr. Sorensen made the agonizing decision to leave Lieutenant Briggs behind, entrusting his care to the rest of the team. She pressed on towards the Emperor's chambers, her resolve hardened by the sacrifice of her fallen friend. As she burst into the Emperor's sanctum, Dr. Sorensen found herself face to face with the Nausicaan leader himself. He was a towering figure, his eyes cold and calculating, his every movement radiating an aura of power and authority. "You think you have won, human?" he sneered, his clawed hand hovering over a control panel. "You think you can force me to bow to your will? I would rather die than surrender to your kind." With a swift motion, the Emperor activated a hidden self-destruct system, the bunker shuddering as the countdown began. Dr. Sorensen's eyes widened in horror as she realized the extent of the Emperor's madness. He was willing to sacrifice himself and everyone in the bunker, all to deny the humans their victory. Dr. Sorensen knew that she had only moments to act. She barked orders into her comm unit, commanding her team to evacuate immediately. Then, with a heavy heart, she turned to face the Emperor, knowing that she would not be leaving the bunker alive. As the bunker began to collapse around them, Dr. Sorensen and the Emperor circled each other, their weapons drawn and their eyes locked in a final deadly showdown. The Emperor lunged forward, his plasma blade flashing in the dim light, but Dr. Sorensen was ready for him. With a swift, precise strike, she disarmed the Emperor, sending his weapon clattering to the ground. The Nausicaan leader staggered back, his eyes wide with disbelief and fear. Dr. Sorensen advanced on the Emperor, her weapon trained on his chest. She knew that she could end the war here and now with a single shot, but as she looked into the Emperor's eyes, she saw something that gave her pause. Behind the hatred and the arrogance, she saw a flicker of fear, a glimmer of doubt. In that moment, Dr. Sorensen realized that the Emperor was not the all-powerful being he pretended to be. He was just a man, flawed and vulnerable, driven by the same desires and fears as any other. With a heavy sigh, Dr. Sorensen lowered her weapon. She knew that she could not bring herself to kill the Emperor in cold blood, even after all the suffering he had caused. Instead, she would leave him to face the consequences of his own actions. As the bunker crumbled around them, Dr. Sorensen activated the prototype frigate's remote pilot system, sending it on a collision course with the Nausicaan fleet in orbit. She knew that the resulting explosion would cripple the enemy forces and give the human fleet a fighting chance. With a final defiant glare at the Emperor, Dr. Sorensen turned and fled the collapsing bunker, the ground shaking beneath her feet as she raced towards the surface. She emerged into the chaos of the battle above, the sky lit up with the flashes of plasma fire and the trails of burning ships. As the prototype frigate detonated in the heart of the Nausicaan fleet, the explosion tore through the enemy ships like a hot knife through butter. The Nausicaan forces, already reeling from the loss of their emperor, scattered and fled, their will to fight shattered by the devastating blow. In the aftermath of the battle, the remaining Nausicaan leadership, realizing that they could not hope to win against the resurgent human forces, grudgingly agreed to a ceasefire and peace negotiations. The war was finally over, but the cost had been high. Lieutenant Briggs, gravely injured in the final battle, was left paralyzed from the waist down, his once promising military career cut tragically short, and Dr. Sorensen, the hero of the human resistance, was presumed dead, buried beneath the rubble of the Emperor's bunker. But even as the galaxy struggled to come to terms with the new balance of power, with humanity emerging as a major player on the galactic stage, the sacrifices of those who had fought and died in the war were not forgotten. The names of Frank, Dr. Sorensen, and countless others became legends, their stories passed down from generation to generation as a testament to the indomitable human spirit and the lengths they would go to defend their way of life. In the years that followed, humanity and the Nausicaans remained locked in a tense Cold War, the scars of the conflict still raw and the threat of renewed hostilities always lurking just beneath the surface. But even as the two sides eyed each other warily across the void of space, there were those on both sides who dared to hope for a better future. For they knew that the sacrifices of the fallen had not been in vain, and that the dream of a galaxy at peace, a galaxy where all species could coexist in harmony, was worth fighting for. And so, even as the wounds of the war continued to fester and the old hatred simmered just beneath the surface, the seeds of hope had been planted, waiting for the day when they would finally bear fruit. The galaxy would never be the same, the scars of the war lingering for generations to come. But even in the darkest of times, there were those who dared to believe. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.